Africa. And I'm not going to get into the practice and describe it because it really disgusts me, but the UN estimates that there's over 100 million women in Africa that have been culturally coerced into undergoing female genital mutilation. This is not some fringe amount of people. This is more than 100 million people. It's a huge number of people. We should be concerned about these things. You look at something like trial by ordeal, which is, we would laugh at it, we'd think about it in some like medieval movie or something like that, but it actually goes on in the world. Liberia still has trial by ordeal. The Supreme Court in that country tried to get rid of it. The president said, no, we've got to keep it. It's basically, trial by ordeal. You basically throw someone in some water or something like that. If they drown, they're innocent. If they rise to the top and live, they're guilty. And that's the kind of primitive nature of that. In China, there's administrative sentencing. Many countries have laws where basically if you are a relative or a friend of a accused criminal, you get arrested until Pakistan's one of those countries, Libya is one of those countries, collective punishment laws. The world is not a very pretty place. I mean, we think about some of the freedoms we have in this country, First Amendment freedoms, for instance. Because we have the First Amendment in this country, don't get trapped into believing the idea that every country has a First Amendment or something similar, because it's not true. Most people living in the world outside of Western civilization live in countries where it is illegal for private citizens or private corporations or nonprofit groups to broadcast the news. This is the purview of the government and the government's agents and the people they've approved alone. Most people living outside of Western civilization don't live in countries where they have a say in their rulers. We need to confront these type of things and not ignore them. Things like honor killings that go on quite often in the Arab world. Look at a country like Bangladesh. In the year 2000, there were 2,130 rapes reported in Bangladesh. You know how many convictions there were? 63. 63 convictions. In a lot of these countries, the testimony of women is taken less than the testimony of a man, is worth half. Particularly for something like rape, you have to get some large amount of men to testify that they were eyewitnesses and that kind of thing. It's almost impossible case to prove. So what I'm suggesting is that what goes on in the rest of the world does not match the ideological preconceptions of multiculturalists and relativists. If we had a true multiculturalism, we would know a lot more about the rest of the world. We wouldn't think that it's basically like a Disney world with different kind of people living in it. We'd know what really goes on and not some phony multiculturalism that's like a sanitized version of what really happens. You should demand from your professors that you get the truth and not a bunch of phoniness about what goes on outside of Western civilization. Should we do it with sensitivity and some perspective? Sure, but you shouldn't sacrifice the truth to sensitivity and perspective and that sort of thing. You should demand the truth. The second portion that I referred to, reason why I think the left has got America wrong, is basically about what goes on in this country. The left is wholly ignorant of our history, of some of the things that go on in this country that lacks perspective, their view of America. Let me give you a few examples. A couple weeks back, an American won a share of the Nobel Prize for Medicine. This was the 45th time in the last 60 years that an American has done so. This guy won it with a couple of Brits. But for the last 60 years, we've pretty much been the dominant country when it comes to saving people's lives and elongating their lives, making them happier and healthy. If you look at the life expectancy rates at the beginning of the century and now, there's quite a gap there. And one of the main reasons for that gap is the United States of America. We cured polio, tuberculosis, created vaccine for hepatitis B, invented things like the MRI and the CAT scan. These things didn't merely help Americans, they helped the rest of the world. And so you have to ask yourself, I mean, when a cure for blindness comes, or for AIDS, or for all forms of cancer, is it going to be a Nigerian that creates these cures? Is it going to be a Pakistani? Is it going to be a guy from Finland? Probably not. Probably not. You'd be a fool to put money on that. Will it be an American? Maybe. Maybe. There's a chance of it. Certainly it's probably going to be someone within Western civilization. And that is something that's ignored by the left, is the contributions like that we've made to the rest of the world. You look at technology. Things like the lights in this room, television, VCR, the airplane, the internet, the computer, the supercomputer, the space shuttle. You can go on and on. These are all things that were invented by Americans. So anytime our enemies, guys like Osama bin Laden, turn on the light, turn on the air conditioning, watch their exploits on TV or monitor what they're doing on the internet, they're giving a tacit endorsement to this culture. One of the mantras that you'll hear from the left is that America is a bigoted and xenophobic country. But if you look a few weeks back in the news, we had something like 250 Haitians cramming onto this ramshackle boat, risking their lives essentially, to leave a country run by men of the same race and come to a country run essentially by men of a different race and ethnicity. Why would you do this? If the number one problem confronting black folks is racism, why would you do this? You're leaving a racism-free zone and coming into one where racism obviously exists. Well, they did this for the same reason that tens of millions of other people have done this similar thing. They did it to come to a country that's free, that offers them economic opportunities and other opportunities that they can't get under the corrupt governments that they live under. America has always been the place where people wanting to do better in life have come. You look at between the years 1820 and 1930, 60% of the world's immigrants came to one country. There's over 140 countries in the world. They came to one country, the United States of America. Now, these days, we take in more people than we did during those years. So when I hear people saying things like America's bigoted or xenophobic, you're really lost if you believe that. You are delusional. You're a fool. The idea that you'd lash out against the one country that takes in, a giant portion of the immigrants, that's kind of a misplaced anger, I would suggest. You look at the generosity of the United States of America, not just personal generosity, but obviously the generosity of our government with our money. Since World War II, we've given more than $500 billion, and this is not in inflation-adjusted numbers, to foreign governments and countries and causes. Obviously, if you adjust it for inflation, it's a lot. The numbers are a lot larger. This year, this fiscal year, we give more than $25 billion in aid, direct aid, indirect aid, to foreign governments, to foreign countries, to international programs. That's about $25 billion more than other countries give us, if you haven't figured that out yet. The idea that we've somehow milked the rest of the world for our wealth is very silly. We give more money to foreign countries than any other country on earth. That's a fact. You look at the budgets of the other countries and know that as a fact. And yet, I can understand why people in this country might gripe about all the money that's being taken from their taxes, but when I see folks in Pakistan, for instance, burning American flags or chanting "Down with America" or some variation on that slogan, I wonder why they are looking at the world that way. They're getting almost $1 billion out of our coffers. Finally, I would ask you to look at freedom and democracy, and I think these are two of the greatest gifts that we've kind of given to the rest of the world, or at least we've provided a spark, lit a spark for those kind of ideas to spread. One of the things that you'll hear from folks on the left is that the American founding is significant because certain people were excluded from the franchise, that blacks couldn't vote, women couldn't vote, poor people couldn't vote. And to a certain extent, this criticism is correct in the sense that at least, most slaves certainly couldn't vote. Most free blacks could not vote. Women could vote in New Jersey up until 1808, but they couldn't vote anywhere else. Certain states did have requirements for property to vote. That's all true. But to think that that's significant about the founding is to kind of not look at the bigger picture. In the 1770s and the 1780s, people were excluded from the franchise everywhere. The United States was not unique in this aspect. What was unique about the United States was that anyone was included in the franchise, that anyone could vote. That is something that you didn't see. You saw that in maybe a handful of countries. And to argue that we should be having these belly-aching sessions about how the founders excluded certain people and that kind of thing strikes me as a bit silly. It lacks historical context. It imposes present-day values on the past. And it doesn't take the long view and look what was actually going on in the world at that time. What is unique about America at that time is that anyone could vote. That was an historical curiosity in those years. And I think that's something to celebrate. It's certainly something that foreigners recognize. I mean, if you look at other countries, and the germ of freedom and self-government has spread, and I'm pleased about that, but it hasn't spread enough. I mean, most people living outside of Western civilization have no say in who their rulers are. They don't live in democratic, Republican forms of government. And this is very, very sad. And yet, when they demand self-government, when they demand freedom, it's not the founding documents of Mongolia that they cite, or the founding documents of Denmark. They quote the Declaration of Independence. They quote the Constitution of the United States of America. It's not the cultural icons of Libya or South Africa or Germany that they hold up. They erect papier-mâché statues of the Statue of Liberty, and they march around with them. We saw this in Tiananmen Square. People in the rest of the world recognize America as a bastion of freedom and democracy, a country that has done more than any other country to spread this idea around the globe. Yet there's a lot of folks in this country that do not realize that. The title of the book is Why the Left Hates America, and obviously having a title like that begs the question, why does the left hate America? Nietzsche said there's no reason to muddy the waters when things aren't that deep. And let's face it, the left is not that deep. And so I think there's a very simple explanation for why the left does hate America. And the answer is that America stands as a massive refutation for everything, for a lot of the central tenets of the left. The left says that capitalism is a failed economic system. But if you look at America, we're the largest free market country in the world. We're also the richest country in the world. Has capitalism failed? I don't think so. The left says, as I alluded to earlier, that America is a racist country. And yet, people of color, every decade by the tens of millions, people of every color try to flock to this country's shores and find a better life here. And they've been doing this for hundreds of years. Are these people to be thought of as masochists? Why would they run into the arms of their supposed oppressors? The left says that Christianity is an intolerant religion. It's irrational. They generally have a hostility towards religion, leftists, but they particularly have a hostility towards Christianity. But yet you look at this country that's run primarily by men of the Christian faith. People of any religion, you can have the most far-out religion and you can practice it here. No one's going to hassle you. And if they are, those people are probably going to be looked down upon. That same tolerance is not reciprocated in nations run by men of other faiths. What I'm saying is that you try to practice Christianity in a place like China or Saudi Arabia or Burma or Cuba, and you'll find out pretty quickly that tolerance is not universal. Religious freedom is not universal. So what the left touts in theory, the American experience refutes in practice. And for people that are so passionately attached to theory, this is a very bitter pill to swallow. So rather than revise their inept theories, they lash out at the one country that proves these theories are quite foolish. And that country, of course, the United States of America. When the left looks at America, they're likely to see the slave master's whip, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, My Lai, Matthew Shepard dangling from a fence post, the homeless. That's what a lot of the leftists see when they look at America. What the rest of America sees looking at this country might include Washington's army bravely standing with him at Valley Forge, the 13th Amendment, Thomas Edison turning on the lights. You look at something like Lindbergh touching down at La Bourget, or the American GIs storming the beaches of Normandy, or liberating Dachau. You look at the wonder of Jonas Salk's lab, or Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, all of that is true. The first part, what the left sees, what the rest of us see, that's all America. And I'm very much for teaching the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to America. but you can't